Something strange is happening in Cleveland, and the entire NFL fan base can feel it. Every week, the Browns take the field with a young quarterback who refuses to fold, refuses to complain, and refuses to point fingers. Yet somehow, the situations around him keep getting harder to ignore. Viral clips start circulating. Fans begin connecting dots. Analysts raise eyebrows. And suddenly, the conversation shifts from simple, bad football to something much more unsettling. Because when thousands of fans all see the same thing, questionable effort, missed assignments, and moments that look way too bizarre to be accidental, people start asking uncomfortable questions. Not because anyone wants drama, but because the patterns are impossible to unsee. One play turns into two. One miscue turns into a trend. And before long, the entire city is whispering the same thing. Why does it look like the people around Shedeur Sanders aren't helping him succeed? Now, to be clear, nobody can say for sure what's happening behind closed doors, but what we can talk about is what fans are seeing on the field. And right now, the footage itself has become a character in this story. Clips showing linemen barely engaging, receivers disappearing, confusion on crucial downs, and a rookie quarterback fighting through it all with more poise than anyone expected. Whether you think it's incompetence, miscommunication, or something deeper, one thing is obvious: this situation is not normal. And to understand how it got to this point, we need to start with the single moment that ignited a firestorm across the NFL community. It takes a lot to shake an entire fan base, but sometimes one moment is enough to flip a narrative overnight. And for Cleveland, that moment came on a critical fourth and two. A situation where every player on the field is supposed to be locked in, dialed up, and fighting for inches. Instead, fans watched something so bizarre, so out of character for professional football, that it instantly became the most talked about clip of the week. On the replay, Shedeur Sanders takes the snap. Tension is high. The stakes are obvious. The pocket collapses almost immediately, but not because Buffalo dialed up an exotic blitz or executed some genius stunt. No, what set the internet buzzing was what appeared to be complete disengagement from the left side of the line. As the defender charged in almost untouched, viewers watched Cam Robinson barely move from his stance, drifting backward with what looked like little urgency or resistance. It didn't resemble a missed assignment. It didn't look like a player beaten clean by superior technique. It looked off, and fans noticed instantly. Within minutes, social media lit up. Some fans accused the lineman of giving minimal effort. Others insisted it looked intentional. A few argued it was just a bad moment blown out of proportion. But regardless of which side people fell on, the conversation exploded. Because regardless of intent, the visual was undeniable. Shedeur Sanders never had a chance on that play. But what made this moment even more explosive was timing. This wasn't the first questionable protection breakdown fans had seen. It wasn't the first time Shedeur took a hit behind the line before his receivers even finished their routes. Instead, it felt like the tipping point, the play that finally matched the frustration building for weeks. And just as importantly, it became the spark that made fans go back and rewatch everything else. Suddenly, people were analyzing previous games with a new lens, looking for patterns, inconsistencies, or signs of something deeper. Whether it was poor technique, miscommunication, or something else entirely, viewers couldn't ignore the feeling that this moment was the symptom of a bigger problem. Because one bad play happens, one strange moment happens, but when the same quarterback is consistently put in unwinnable situations, fans start searching for answers. And that's when the story shifts from a single play to a much larger conversation. To understand why the viral fourth and two moment ignited such outrage, you have to rewind months before the season ever kicked off. Because according to fans, analysts, and even some former players, the warning signs were already flashing in training camp, long before Shedeur Sanders ever took a regular season snap. And it wasn't just about schemes or personnel. It was about how the rookie quarterback was being handled from day one. Rumors began circulating early in camp that Shedeur wasn't getting traditional first-team reps. Reports claim he was practicing on side fields, throwing to depth chart backups and staff members while other quarterbacks worked directly with the starting offense. Now, every organization has its own development strategy, and not every rookie gets royal treatment. But to many observers, the optics felt strange. When your young quarterback spends more time building chemistry with equipment assistants than with actual receivers, people start raising eyebrows. But it wasn't only the reps, it was the overall atmosphere around him. Some fans felt the messaging from the coaching staff seemed lukewarm, almost hesitant to fully embrace him. Meanwhile, footage from camp showed repeated protection issues, miscommunications, and stalled drives during drills, leaving many to wonder whether the foundation was shaky before the season even started. None of this proves anything sinister, but perception matters. And from the outside looking in, the early months painted a picture of a quarterback developing in chaos rather than structure. So when the regular season began and the same issues reappeared, missed blocks, blown assignments, receivers running the wrong depths, fans didn't see it as a coincidence. They saw it as the continuation of something that had been quietly brewing behind the scenes. Then came the inconsistencies in personnel decisions. Analysts questioned why certain players were rotated in unusual ways, or why offensive strategies seemed to shift dramatically from one week to the next. When these patterns lined up with the struggles Shedeur was facing, it added fuel to an already growing narrative that the problems surrounding him weren't new, they were inherited. And that's what made the 4th and 2 clip so explosive. It wasn't an isolated failure. It felt like the latest chapter in a story that started before the season even began, a story fans were already suspicious of. Because once people believe a pattern exists, every mistake becomes evidence, and every questionable moment becomes a clue. And the next clue appeared on game days, where Shedeur's response to chaos told fans something they didn't expect. What makes this entire situation even more explosive is the simple fact that, despite the chaos around him, Shedeur Sanders kept getting better. Week after week, even as the noise grew louder and the mistakes around him piled up. His individual development didn't stall. It accelerated. And that's why so many fans say the narrative around him just doesn't add up, because the performance on the field tells a completely different story. Early in the season, he was labeled everything from too raw to not ready for the NFL stage. But when you actually study the tape, something surprising becomes clear. He wasn't unraveling under pressure, he was adapting to it. Each game showed subtle improvements that only quarterbacks who truly understand the position make. He began stepping up in the pocket more confidently, maneuvering around collapsing protection, and taking the safer throws instead of forcing deep shots into coverage. The checkdowns that once felt like desperation became calculated decisions. The scrambles that looked frantic started turning into smart extensions of the play. Even veteran analysts who were skeptical at first began acknowledging a quiet truth. Shedeur was learning faster than anyone expected. What made fans even more protective of him was how he handled the adversity. Not once did he throw his teammates under the bus. Not once did he shift blame or lash out in frustration. Instead, he took accountability for situations he didn't even create. When receivers dropped passes, he defended them. When the offensive line struggled, he praised their effort. When special teams made mistakes that shifted momentum, he never pointed fingers. That kind of composure is rare, especially for a rookie dropped into one of the toughest environments in football. And because he stayed poised, fans began noticing the contrast between his mentality and the disarray happening around him. It felt like he was the one stabilizing the team, not the other way around. Even more telling was the reaction from opposing defenders. Multiple players throughout the season commented on his toughness, his pocket strength, and the way he kept getting up after hits that would rattle most rookies. When your opponents respect you more than some people inside your building seem to, fans start asking uncomfortable questions. And that brings us directly to the moment that set the internet on fire, the now infamous 4th and 2 play. Because no matter how much patience or composure a quarterback has, there's only so much he can do when his own protection collapses by choice rather than by force. Every NFL game has a moment that defines it, a single play that fans remember long after the final whistle. For the Browns that week, it wasn't a touchdown, an interception, or a highlight reel catch. It was a non-play. A moment so baffling, so unexplainable that fans immediately clipped it, slowed it down, and spread it online like wildfire. The infamous 4th and 2. Here's the setup. The Browns are still in the game. The momentum isn't completely gone. A first down keeps the drive alive and gives Shedeur Sanders another chance to do what he's been doing all day, fighting through pressure and keeping Cleveland competitive. Everyone in the stadium knows how important this snap is. 4th and 2 is where teams show grit. It's where the offensive line digs in, lowers the shoulder, and gives everything they have. Except that's not what happened. When the ball was snapped, cameras caught something so wild that fans thought the clip was edited. Cam Robinson, a 300-pound veteran offensive lineman, barely moved. No punch, no slide step, no effort to engage the defender. He just stood there for a full beat, like he didn't know the play had started. And by the time he reacted, the defender was already past him, flying straight at the quarterback untouched. Shedeur didn't even get a chance. The play died before it ever had a chance to become a play. The internet exploded instantly. Fans slowed the tape. Analysts paused it frame by frame. And what made it even more suspicious wasn't just the lack of effort, it was the timing. This wasn't a random first-quarter snap. This wasn't garbage time. This was the biggest down of the drive, a moment where even the worst lineman in the league would normally show maximum effort. Instead, it looked effortless, in the worst possible way. Some fans argued it was miscommunication. Others said Robinson might have blown the assignment, but many pointed out that even a blown assignment still involves effort. You still engage. You still touch somebody. What the clip showed looked like none of that, and that's why it caught fire. Because this wasn't the first questionable moment. It was just the most obvious one. And what made it even harder to ignore was that Shedeur didn't complain. He didn't throw his hands up. He didn't yell at anyone. He simply got up, dusted himself off, and jogged off the field like someone who's had to swallow this kind of moment all season. But as shocking as that play was, it wasn't the only pattern fans started noticing. And once the experts weighed in, the conversation around Shedeur took an entirely new turn. Once the 4th and 2 clip went viral, analysts across Cleveland finally stopped sugarcoating things. For weeks, fans had been pointing out the same patterns, the missed blocks, the dropped passes, the strange coaching decisions, but the mainstream voices kept brushing it off as rookie growing pains or normal offensive struggles. But after that play, even the most loyal Browns media couldn't deny what was right in front of them. On the Instant Reaction show, G. Bush and Earl the Pearl broke the silence. What started as a normal post-game breakdown quickly turned into one of the most honest conversations anyone had heard all season. They didn't dance around the truth. They didn't hide behind cliches. They called it exactly what it was: nasty work. And for the first time, the blame wasn't being thrown on Shedeur Sanders. It was being redirected at the people around him. Because here's the part the stat watchers keep ignoring: Shedeur actually played a solid game. He didn't crumble under pressure. He didn't panic. He didn't show any signs of being overwhelmed. In fact, he handled the number 2 pass defense in the entire NFL better than anyone expected. On that opening drive, he looked locked in, working through his reads, taking easy throws, and keeping the offense moving. It was controlled, calm, professional football. But every quarterback, even the great ones, can only carry a team so far when the support system around them is collapsing. And that's what G. Bush highlighted: the fact that Shedeur's mistakes are being magnified while everyone else's failures somehow get ignored. Let's break it down. The first interception. A catchable ball straight through the hands of a running back, who turned his head before securing it. The second interception. A tipped pass at the line, something no quarterback can control. The sacks. Most weren't coverage sacks. They weren't Shedeur holding the ball too long. They were instant pressure from an offensive line that collapses faster than a wet paper bag. And yet somehow, the loudest voices were still trying to push the Shedeur isn't ready narrative. That's what finally pushed analysts to speak up. They've seen enough football to recognize improvement, the footwork, the pocket movement, the confidence to take checkdowns instead of forcing throws. Those are signs of growth, not regression. They're the traits coaches beg young quarterbacks to develop. And here, what turned heads most. Shedeur is doing all of this while fighting through chaos that would break most rookies. No consistent protection. No reliable weapons outside of Harold Fannin. And a coaching staff that still hasn't adjusted the system around its quarterback. So when the experts finally admit the problem isn't the rookie, that's when the conversation shifts. Because once the media starts noticing the sabotage, the pressure doesn't stay on Shedeur anymore. It starts boiling toward the people who created this mess. As the pressure on Shedeur Sanders kept increasing, another glaring issue became impossible to ignore: the complete lack of consistency from the receiving corps. And at the center of that conversation is the player who was supposed to be the Browns' top weapon, Jerry Jeudy. The same Jerry Jeudy who was hyped all offseason, promoted as the reliable veteran who would help ease Shedeur's transition into the NFL. But when the lights turned on and the games mattered, Jeudy's presence on the field became harder and harder to notice. Fans were stunned by how invisible he looked against Buffalo. Not just quiet, not just underutilized, completely absent, no clutch catches, no separation, no effort to bail out his quarterback when everything around him was falling apart. It was the kind of performance that leaves people wondering if he even suited up. Meanwhile, the narrative was shifted toward Shedeur, as if a quarterback can magically create production from receivers who aren't getting open or executing their routes. And then there's Harold Fannin, the rookie who refuses to disappear. Week after week, he shows the hunger, the toughness, and the reliability that the Browns desperately need. He catches the contested balls. He breaks tackles. He turns routine throws into momentum-changing plays. He fights like every snap matters. And that contrast between a rookie giving everything and a supposed star doing almost nothing only adds more fuel to this growing fire. But the receivers aren't the only issue. The running backs, the safety valves every quarterback needs, are struggling too. The Quincy Junkins interception wasn't just a mistake. It was a fundamental breakdown from a player who didn't secure the ball before turning upfield. It wasn't a Shedeur problem. It wasn't some accuracy disaster. It was textbook lack of focus. And when the rookie running back went down with a serious injury later in the game, the offense lost one of its few dependable playmakers. Now the Browns' receiving group is even thinner than before. Less depth, fewer reliable targets, more weight on Shedeur's shoulders, and more chances for things to fall apart. And here, where fans started connecting dots. How can a quarterback develop when his best receiver disappears? His safety valves drop catchable passes, and the only guy consistently making plays is another rookie fighting for a role. It paints a picture that goes far beyond one bad game. It reveals a system where Shedeur is being forced to overcome more failures from the players around him than any rookie should. And instead of breaking under the pressure, he keeps battling, which only raises one question. If he's performing like this without help, what would he look like with a real supporting cast? As the reality of this season sets in, Browns fans are left staring at something both terrifying and hopeful: the future. Because despite the chaos, despite the injuries, despite the non-blocking and the vanishing receivers, Cleveland is heading toward something incredibly valuable: multiple first-round picks in the upcoming draft. And those picks might be the only lifeline capable of saving Shedeur Sanders, career before the damage becomes permanent. Let's be brutally honest. This roster, as it's currently built, is not designed to support a young quarterback. Not even close. The offensive line isn't just bad, it's structurally broken. The interior collapses under minimal pressure. The edges lose contain on basic pass rush moves. And the communication. It looks like 5 random strangers playing pickup football for the first time. No scheme on earth can fix an O-line playing with this little discipline and effort. So what should the Browns do? Some fans want a flashy draft, a big-name receiver, a new running back, maybe even a new quarterback, which is laughable considering Shedeur is the only functioning piece of this offense. But when you look at the tape, when you listen to the experts, when you analyze every blown play, there's only one correct path forward. Both first-round picks must be used on offensive linemen. Not one. Not best player available. Not let's grab one lineman and a weapon. No, Cleveland needs a full rebuild in the trenches. This line is historically bad, sabotage level bad. It's the kind of bad that destroys quarterbacks, ruins seasons, and gets coaches fired. Shedeur can't develop timing when he's being hit 2 seconds after the snap. He can't read defenses when he's scrambling for survival. He can't build chemistry when the offense is constantly behind the sticks because the line can't protect or run block. Imagine Shedeur with even average protection. Imagine him with a pocket that lasts more than a blink. Imagine receivers who can get separation and linemen who actually block their assignments. People forget. This kid was evaluated as a potential franchise quarterback long before he landed in Cleveland's chaos. And he's shown enough, the arm talent, the reads, the mobility, the toughness, to justify building around him. But if Cleveland fails to act, if they waste these draft picks, if they pretend this season is anything other than a flashing red warning sign, then the Browns won't just lose games, they'll lose their future. Because Shedeur Sanders is good enough to win. He just needs a team that actually wants him to. When fans argue about the Browns' struggles, they point fingers in 100 different directions. Bad O-line, dropped passes, injuries, poor execution. But if you zoom out and look at the pattern, there's one common thread woven through every issue. The leadership at the top is failing, and that failure has been shaping every disaster on the field. The clearest example, training camp. This is where every team in the NFL lays the foundation for its season, where chemistry is built, where trust is formed, where quarterbacks learn the rhythm and timing of their offense. And yet, instead of working with his receivers, instead of getting reps with the starters, instead of developing timing with the players he would eventually lead, Shedeur Sanders was thrown onto a side field, tossing balls to equipment managers and staffers like some kind of afterthought. That decision alone told the entire building exactly how the coaching staff viewed him. Leadership sets the tone, and when the tone is disrespect, disorganization, and confusion, the entire roster reflects it. Think about the non-block on 4th and 2. Think about the receivers giving minimal separation. Think about the running back whose eyes went downfield before he even caught the ball. These aren't isolated errors. They're symptoms of a team that does not trust its own direction. They come from a culture where accountability is non-existent, where effort isn't demanded, where players can jog through crucial moments because no one at the top is holding them to a higher standard. And then there's Kevin Stefanski, the man calling the plays. Week after week, he preaches discipline and execution while calling some of the most baffling situational plays in the NFL. Going for it on 4th and 2 against one of the top defenses in the league is aggressive. Choosing not to run the ball when you've been gashing them on the ground. That's not aggressive, it's reckless. It's the kind of coaching decision that signals he doesn't understand the strengths of his own team or the weaknesses of the opponent. Leadership is supposed to elevate players, not sabotage them. Good coaches adapt to what they have. Great coaches make young quarterbacks look competent. What we've seen in Cleveland is the opposite. Shedeur has had to elevate them, fighting through chaos, making the right reads, staying poised, and keeping the offense alive despite everything falling apart around him. The truth is simple. You can't expect excellence from players who are being led by someone who can't even provide structure. And until the Browns fix their leadership problem, no amount of talent will save this team. When you step back and look at everything that's unfolded this season, one reality becomes impossible to ignore. The Cleveland Browns aren't losing because they lack talent. They're losing because the pieces that should protect and elevate that talent have completely collapsed. And nowhere is that collapse more obvious than in the way this organization has handled Shedeur Sanders. Week after week, he stepped into chaos and turned it into something competitive. He's shown growth, toughness, and maturity far beyond what anyone expected from a rookie thrown into one of the most dysfunctional environments in the league. While the media tried to paint him as immature or arrogant, his actions have told a different story, one of accountability, humility, and a focus on winning that few quarterbacks his age genuinely possess. But even the strongest mindset can only carry a team so far. You can't build momentum when your offensive line behaves like spectators. You can't sustain drives when receivers disappear in crucial moments. You can't develop as a quarterback when your coaching staff refuses to invest in your growth. And you certainly can't change the culture of a franchise when the people in charge are committed to excuses instead of solutions. That's why this season feels bigger than a win-loss record. It feels like a turning point, a moment when fans, analysts, and even players began recognizing the deeper issue. This isn't about one play. It's not about one dropped pass, one missed block, or one bad decision. It's about a blueprint that was broken long before Shedeur arrived. The encouraging part: the truth is finally out in the open. The tape has exposed what words could never fully describe. Fans are demanding accountability. National voices are starting to question the coaching decisions. And inside the locker room, players are speaking more honestly about what's going wrong. If the Browns have any hope of salvaging this era, any hope of building around a quarterback who has shown real potential, they must rebuild their foundation. That means strengthening the offensive line. That means investing in reliable weapons. And that means replacing leadership that has proven time and time again that it cannot guide this team forward. Shedeur Sanders isn't the problem in Cleveland. He's the only thing keeping the entire operation from falling apart. And if the Browns want a future worth believing in, they need to start acting like they recognize it.